So, Dr. David, we talked about not compartmentalizing life earlier, life, business, how it translates. So, how do your thoughts on that structure translate or relate to a human being instead of a business and their life?
I love that you asked that question because these five core archetypes are our essential architecture as human beings. We we are that. A whole human being is someone who utilizes who embodies the energies of beingness and doingness,
Mm-hmm.
stability and change on behalf of our own personal purpose in service to higher love and wisdom. So we are the CEO of our own lives.
Yes.
Yep.
Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. I'm your co host, Andy McDowell, founder and owner of Generate Your Value, providing self leadership, leadership, and business coaching services for corporate executives and business owners.
And I'm Zach Levy, your other co-host. I run a nationwide financial service business with my wife, Megan.
Together, Zach and I have the intention to bring you tips, concepts, ideas, suggestions, stories, and analogies from A to Z, which will help you to grow your personal brand and leadership skills in such a way that joy, happiness, and success, as you define it for yourself, are achieved.
We hope to use our gifts, talents, and experiences in business and leadership to generate value in your life. And with that being said, let's move to our topic for today. Hello, and welcome to the Generate Your Value podcast. I'm your co-host, Zach Levy, and with me as always, now in our fourth season, can't believe it, still second episode of the fourth season we've recorded together, but Andy
Yeah.
McDowell. So Andy, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Zach, as always, and I'm really excited about this episode. We're talking about a subject that I'm extremely passionate about, getting into business strategy, structure, and how it is that a company can best tackle the marketplace and be wildly successful. And we have changing times in the world. And because we have changing times in the world and in the marketplace, that means companies need to change the way they do things to match the change
Like
that's
we've
happening
talked
in
about a
the
fluid
world.
business plan before or something like that.
Yeah, well, so we're gonna get eye deep in this today with our guest. Our guest today is Dr. David Gruder, and let me read your bio to you, the listening audience, so you get a little bit of background of where he's been and what he's done. But we're going to let him come in and sort of fill in the holes, if you will, for us from the get-go. So David Gruder is not just an accomplished psychologist and captivating TEDx speaker, but a true trailblazer in the field of human potential and societal transformation. As the visionary founder of the Center for Enlightened Self-Sovereignty and Integrity Revolution, Dr. Gruder has devoted many decades to the exploration of personal growth, societal change, and the profound impact of technology on both. With an impressive collection of 12 prestigious awards and a string of best-selling books, Dr. Gruder has been hailed as America's integrity expert by Radio TV Interview Report. As a board chair level advisor, captivating keynote speaker, and accomplished trainer, he equips leaders, influencers, executives, helping professionals, and concerned citizens with a comprehensive suite of psychospirituality, elevated inner mindsets, and outer skills for ushering in an enlightened future for humanity. So, a lot of big words there.
True.
All rightfully deserved. So let's bring him in, Dr. David Gruder. Thank you for joining Zach and I on this episode.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me.
So, as I stated, lots of high level things in your bio, not a path that a lot of people have been on in the world. So, could you give our listening audience kind of an overview of your career story and how it is that you find yourself where you are today in life?
Yeah, well, it's kind of fun being at the stage in life that I'm at. As we're recording this, I'm approaching my 70th birthday
Mm-hmm.
in a few months, and so I have the joy and the benefit of 2020 hindsight, being able to look back on the arc of my life in order to see how my life unfolded in ways that prepared me to do the work that I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no foresight really about what that was going to look like. So all I can use is hindsight. Um, I I've been an entrepreneur since 1980, and I was thrust into roles that were way beyond my years starting in 1971. Leadership roles and curriculum development roles and administrative roles and things like that that I should not by by any stretch of the imagination have been in, and that's been really good for me. I was trained in master planning, which is building 50 to 100-year plans for the arc of a business about a decade before I got my doctorate in clinical and organizational development psychology. And so I'm a very odd duck as a psychologist, not only because of being both trained in clinical and organizational development work, but also having that kind of master planning, strategic mindset,
Mm-hmm.
which a lot of my colleagues in my home field of psychology don't know how to relate to because they haven't been exposed to that. And so the result of that is that I've been focused in my career on at the broadest level on elevating society, but the leverage point, one of the big leverage points for that, for me, is businesses and especially entrepreneurial businesses, because for me, that is the engine through which societal development gets to be propelled. And so working at the leading edge of leader development and culture creation and architecture of how executive suites are designed and things like that is really a juicy source of passion for me. The last thing that I'll say in the way of my background, and you're welcome to ask any specific questions you want, but at this point in my career, I actually just refer to myself as a recovering psychologist and professional troublemaker.
Well, we need troublemakers in this world, otherwise change doesn't happen, right?
Right. Relabel as
Right.
disruptors. It's good.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, we definitely need that. Um, I think it's an undervalued area that you participate in the world. I don't think enough people sort of connect the dots with everything that you have been trained on and participate in. I'm a firm believer that in this world, because life is complex, we have a tendency to compartmentalize things and not
Hmm.
study enough the dynamics, the interactiveness, uh, the connection, if you will, between all the items that you just listed. So I think that's part of the reason why it's so intriguing to me, because I have developed and spent my time in the coaching world trying to illustrate to folks how much overlap there is between life and business. That I don't
Yes.
think it's enough conversation or interaction at all.
Unfortunately, so. And I've been an integrative oriented person since earliest childhood. One of my favorite solitary games as a child was dot to dot, connecting
Mm-hmm.
the dots in a diagram in order to see what the picture was that emerged from connecting the dots.
Yep.
It's just the way that my mind is wired. So it's natural for me to do what you and I have found, unfortunately, is not natural for enough people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So let's dive into your. You and Mark S.A. Smith wrote two books, the Nimble C-Suite and the Nimble Company, that we're going to focus today in on the conversation. You were kind enough to supply me a copy of the C-Suite book ahead of time so that I could read it and be prepared the best for this conversation. And I have to tell you, I found my neck is sore from reading it because it was constantly doing this as I was reading through it. And what I like to do with you today is kind of start at the beginning of your thought process as you described it in the book, so that our listening audience can understand your viewpoint the best. And you started off the conversation, so to speak, in the book about the history, in particular in this country, and maybe to a certain respect the world, through the last 50 years or so, that is kind of broken up into, I can't remember the exact number, 6 or 7 economies that we had. Would you mind quickly going through that listing of that history and give people the context as to why you say we're now in a transformation economy?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the economy that I grew up in, I grew up in and around New York City. And so the only version of marketing and advertising that I was exposed to, and therefore as a child, the only version I knew existed, even though it's not the only version, was Madison Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And what Madison Avenue advertising was about in the 50s and 60s as I was growing up was manipulating people into uh, creating demand for products and services that the marketing firms were selling on behalf of the producers of those products and services. And so we were very much in a product or service economy in the sense that what people were being pitched, what people were being told they needed to buy was specific products, specific services. And that orientation started to shift in the early years of this century, the early 2000s, where the marketplace really evolved into wanting great experiences with the products and services that they purchased. And so we moved from a product and service oriented marketplace into what was called and is called the experience economy or the experience marketplace. And one of the most well-known examples of that would would be Apple,
Mm-hmm.
where regardless of whether you like Apple or not, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The What I'm trying to say is that Apple was an example of a company that said, we want to create a great experience for people with a computer. We want the computer to be something more than just a machine. We want people to view it as aesthetically pleasing and easy to use and enjoyable to engage with. So it was a really high profile example of experience economy oriented business pivoting. And that continued to evolve into roughly, give or take, 2018, when the marketplace shifted again from the experience economy to the transformation economy, in which people are now in larger and larger numbers, and we're talking about what's been estimated to be a $3 trillion marketplace now. The transformation economy, the transformation marketplace. People are wanting transformative experiences. So transformative on top of experiences
Mm-hmm.
with the products and services that they buy. And so the marketplace has become increasingly sophisticated, and the challenge that that creates, and I think that there's an economy beyond the current one, the transformation marketplace, which we can get into if you want. But the point I want to make at the moment is that the way that businesses need to be structured and need to be purposed and need to function in a transformation marketplace is really not compatible with the way that businesses were structured and functioned in the marketplace that was solely focused on buying products and services for the sake of the products and services themselves. And businesses haven't known how to make that pivot into restructuring themselves to be truly compatible with and in service to the transformation marketplace. And that's what Mark Smith and I talk about in the Nimble C-Suite.
Yeah, and I often use Steve Jobs and Apple as an example in my coaching and when I'm writing in my book and so forth, because I talk a lot about value comes in many different shapes, sizes, and colors, right? So, in the earliest example you gave, marketing was talking about sort of the functional value. You have this particular problem, then buy this product, right? You need to hammer a nail into the wall, then I've got the hammer for you, kind of thing. And so it's just about functional value.
Yeah.
Then we moved to the Steve Jobs era where he was bringing other values to the forefront as well, from not only the functional value, what a computer can do for you, but also intrinsic value, emotional value through the design, actual physical design of the product, a development of a community, a development of an ecosystem of products, and so forth. You're bringing more value in different shapes, colors, and sizes to the customer. And now in the transformation economy, we're even adding more colors and flavors of value to the marketplace in the business.
Well
From that
said.
perspective. And that's how I've always viewed it, is from a value perspective. And part of the reason why my neck hurts is you were going through it in your book. I'm like, yep, I'm totally aligned with you. I speak a different language about it, but it's totally aligned.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So, Dr. David, with the added sophistication that comes along with the transformation economy, I mean, would you say if a business is going to thrive, not just survive, it's forcing them to level up and go beyond where they've been before?
Oh my gosh, yes. It is definitely forcing that. And a lot of businesses who are aware of that have been for a good number of years now been creating these kinds of new and novel executive roles like chief happiness officer, just as one for instance. Very outside the box, not part of an executive team kinds of chief roles
Right.
in terms of what what was used in the future. And because of that, the executive teams have become really diffused and chaotic because they're barking up the right tree and knowing they need to redesign the architecture of their
Right.
executive team, but they don't have a clear vision and framework for doing that in a precise and responsive way. They're just knowing that something needs to change, and they're doing their best to improvise.
100%. I mean,
Yeah, kind of experimenting with it to see what's good fits.
Right. And it's really backfired in a lot of ways.
and with that, I mean, would you say that by highlighting that elevated value, right, that's caused some of the divide we're seeing today in the political landscape, things like that?
Well, yeah, because the the whole field of corporate social responsibility started to gather steam in the late 1990s. and this whole notion of what in corporate social responsibility was originally called, and I prefer to continue to use this terminology, the triple bottom line of profitability, which is people, planet, and financial.
Hmm.
So, so profitability measured by the well-being of the people, both inside the company and the customer or client that's being served, and the deriving good profits in ways that aren't harming the world, aren't harming the environment, aren't harming society. So that triple bottom line of corporate social responsibility was, I think, a reflection of the direction that society was trying to move, in my opinion, has been trying to move since the 1960s, not particularly effectively. And uh, in in the political or societal realms, what we've seen is this massive split that is not, I mean, the surface level people talk about the Democrats versus Republicans, but that's not really where the split
Right.
is. That's a symptom of it. The split is between those who are saying the thing that's really the most important is societal well-being versus the people who are saying the thing that's most important is personal freedom.
Hmm.
And that polarization, that belief that one of those two things is more important than the other, is part of today's insanity. It's in contradiction to the United States Constitution, which establishes a country that essentially is supposed to function at the intersection of preserving personal freedom and the common good, not making one more important than the other, but
Right.
engaging in the tension between those two poles.
Find the win-win.
Yes, yes. It's got to be a both and the polarization is this delusion that it's an either or.
Hmm. Yeah, it's supposed to be an and instead of an or. In the job of governance, the function of government is to find that sweet spot between the two. That's going to
Yes,
maximize the freedom and the goodwill of society at the same time. How is it that we can take a particular subject and find where that sweet spot is? And so we're going to have one voice on one side, one voice on the other, have a dialogue between the two and find out where that sweet spot is. And
exactly.
now we've got people on either side just giving each other the middle finger and saying screw you.
Exactly. And that's part of the collective mental illness that we're in the midst of today.
Yeah.
And the thing that's ironic, I think your viewers and listeners will appreciate knowing what the original version of business business licensing, if you will, was when the United States first came into existence. It was called corporate chartering,
Hmm.
and and each state was responsible for approving requests for corporate charters in their state. And so there were certain variations in the structure, but the overall structure was universal among all the states, which was that a newly formed company would apply to their state's designated person to have their corporate charter approved. The corporate charter would be approved for some period of years, usually in the range of 9 to 12 years or so, after which they had to reappear in front of that person and demonstrate two things. Number one, they were profitable. They weren't mooching. They weren't debting in the sense of dysfunctional debt rather than
Hmm.
healthy debt,
Right.
Right.
and that they were profiting in a way that was not at the expense of the common good. It was not at the expense of societal well-being. If they demonstrated those two things, both of those two things, their charter, their corporate charter, would be renewed for another period of time, and their corporate charter could be renewed in perpetuity every so many years, as long as each time it was up for renewal, they demonstrated they were still profitable and not at the expense of societal well-being.
Hmm.
Very simple formula, got to completely abandoned.
Yeah, as you were describing it, I kept saying to myself, "Well, that's not reality today.
Not
So what
even
happens?"
close.
And what I think
In
I'm hearing you say is it's lack of enforcement.
Well, it was not just lack of enforcement, but it was a change in policy and a change in legal precedent in the 1880s is when the U.S. Supreme Court came down with what is a questionable decision in terms of their own process, meaning that it's not even clear that the Supreme Court actually voted on this, but it was recorded as though it was a vote that designated corporations as people, as citizens.
Mm.
And at that point, legalized lobbying of government officials occurred. And so what we've seen over time is this takeover where special interests are pouring huge amounts of funds into influencing national government and state government as well to support policies and decisions that meet their own special interests, regardless of how much or how little that harms the common good. And so instead of the people being represented in governance, it is special interests that are primarily represented in governance. And that is a sign of mental illness in a society.
Mm. So let's move next
Sure.
step down in your book, and I want to start this next segment with. I recently did a post in LinkedIn where I made the claim that people can no longer afford to not be creative in their lives. With technology moving in the direction that it is now with AI and so forth, and changes in the world and the marketplace, is going to require, if we're going to have the same kind of value showing up in the world with the same kind of monetary figures at our current level or even higher, creativity is going to have to, and innovation is going to have to really ratchet itself up. And I'm a firm believer that the engine or the fuel, if you will, for creativity is love. So let's get into the term nimbility. You stated that the difference between agile, so we've heard the term agile for a number of years, sort of came out of the IT world. How is it that we can learn from from information we didn't have before, or the mistakes we made, or whatever, faster? How do we fail faster to learn so that we can shorten our development times of applications in the IT world? And I had a little bit of exposure to it in my Boeing days, as we were bringing in the Agile framework into the business. But if I got what you said correctly in the book, you define the difference between agile and nimbility as the speed with which an organization could change to market changes, and that nimbility requires becoming a better version of ourselves because we need the tools or the skills and talents that we have when we're a better version of ourselves to be able to react faster to changes and be more innovative. And that's the reason why we need to start thinking in a nimbility way as opposed to an agile way. Did I read that right?
Yeah, yeah. The the becoming a better version of ourselves, part of that is the transformation marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
The notion of becoming a better version of ourselves wasn't really so important in the past in the way that businesses thought about themselves. And becoming a better version of ourselves in terms of nimbility is living at the intersection of resilience plus innovation. stability plus transformation plus change. And this is every business that's been around for a while knows that it naturally goes through these pivot points where in the beginning of a business your focus is fully on innovation, because in the beginning of a business you're bringing something new to the marketplace, so of course your focus has to be on innovation.
Right.
And if what you've done really takes off, then you've got to refine your processes and figure out how to scale without scaling too fast and causing your business to implode and things like that. And so you move from innovation to fruitfulness, to fruition, right? And as you are in the fruition stage, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to rest on your laurels and think that, oh, yeah, we've made it now. We're profitable, we're fruitful, our innovation has been good, and then become a dinosaur like Kodak did with the camera industry, or you're going to bifurcate after the fruition phase. You're going to go into a third phase, which is where you're continuing to be fruitful with what you originally innovated with, and you're looking at what's the next innovation that continues our business's trajectory in remaining a thought and market leader in whatever our niche happens to be. And this, in a durable business, this is going on all the time. You're going from innovation to fruition to bifurcation. And in the bifurcation, your next innovation is going to reach fruition, and it's going to bifurcate again into a next innovation. And businesses that aren't constantly transforming are businesses that will become dinosaurs sooner or later, no matter how good the product or service was that they originally developed that was originally successful. That's nimbility in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think it's increasingly important, and what I talk to my clients about all the time is when you're looking at a why statement or a purpose statement or whatever for your business, that if you create one that, and I'll use aviation terms because that's where I came from. If you're picking that at, say, the 40,000 foot level, you're going to get yourself in trouble because you're limiting who you are when you have to keep innovating. You're kind of going to have to go outside your sandbox per se, because you pick the dimensions of that sandbox too small by the very fact you picked a mission or purpose that was too tactical or too specific in nature, as opposed to picking one up at the 100,000 foot level that gives you that freedom, that bigger sandbox to keep innovating and yet not lose your mission or purpose that you in the C-suite as well as all the other employees can still hang on to, understand, and use as a guide, so to speak, as you move forward and keep innovating.
Yes, exactly. There's a lot of confusion in the business world between strategy and tactics.
Yep.
But there's also a lot of confusion in the business world that you're talking about between purpose and strategy, right?
Right.
Because strategy is supposed to be in service to the purpose. And
Yes.
purpose, if it's not at that 100,000 foot level, it's not a durable purpose. You know, the old Stephen Covey line from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, begin with the end in mind. Well, almost. Really, I think a much more useful phrasing of that is begin with the best possible end in mind. Be audacious. Dare to transform humanity in a positive way. Start off there in terms of whatever segment of that you want to focus on in your business, so that your business can keep evolving toward that audacious vision through its various phases of development.
I mean, it goes back to as cliche as the saying is, if you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not innovating, you become a dinosaur. Right.
Right. And the problem is, again, it's a both and, nimbility in terms of innovation plus resilience. When, when a company abandons innovation, they become addicted to the status quo. And when they abandon organization standards, predictability, structure, stability, they squelch and stifle innovation. And so classically, polarization in a company is going to be between the R&D, the innovators, research and development type individuals and executives, and the folks like chief financial officers and others, legal folks, people whose task is to preserve resilience and stability. And when these two groups are fighting against each other rather than realizing they're the left hand and the right hand of a whole being, that's when companies get in trouble. That's when they silo. That's when they get polarized, instead of realizing that you've got to incorporate the wisdom of both innovation and resilience into all of your decision making.
Definitely.
Yeah. So in your thought process as we're going down the book, you then start a conversation about the different leadership archetypes that they are, and the fact that those archetypes have a specific title, if you will, within the typical C-suite. Can you quickly, for the listening audience, list out what those archetypes are, where they kind of fit in the C-suite?
Sure. First of all, what an archetype is, for those who aren't familiar with that, is it's a psychological term that represents a prototype, if you will, that focuses on specific aspects of being human. And so there are basically 5 core archetypal energies. We've got the energy of and let me say one more thing about that. There 4 of the 5 are paired, so 2 and 2, and then the 5th is at the intersection. If you can think of a vertical and horizontal axis, the 5th is at the intersection of those 2 axes, and they're counterbalancing energies. So, for example, you've got doingness, which is a really big, important part of a business, getting stuff done. That's the warrior archetype, and it is the chief operations officer, right?
Right.
Getting stuff done. And the counterbalancing energy to doingness is beingness. And beingness is the lover archetype. And the lover archetype has gotten really screwed up in the business world because of the hijacking of HR, human relations, or dubbed by some of my colleagues as HR, the Department of Human Remains. And I'll explain in a moment why that's gotten hijacked and how to unravel it. But the lover archetype in business is supposed to be about loving on our clients, our customers, so brand integrity, and loving on our own personnel so that they're highly engaged, highly productive, and highly fulfilled. And as a result, the business is highly profitable. So the lover archetype in business is missing. It's underaddressed. And then if you view that as the vertical, the horizontal, the 2 counterbalancing energies on the horizontal are what we were talking about before, resilience and innovation, meaning you've got the energy of transformation, which is the magician archetype, and you've got the energy of stability, predictability, organization, and standards, and that's the steward archetype. So the steward archetype is responsible in business. The executive roles are are the stability roles, like a chief revenue officer, chief sustainability officer, rather, making sure that everything is sustainable. And I'm not talking about environmental sustainability, which is really important too, but in this context, I'm talking about the business's sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And that's stewardship, that's stability. And then the counterbalance is innovation, it's transformation, it's how do you keep developing better and better ways of delivering what you're delivering, or new things to deliver to your existing target marketplace, things like that. And that's they're the chief revenue people. They're the ones that are coming up with new ways of continuing to develop new revenue streams. And then, of course, at the centerpiece is the choice maker archetype. It's the sovereign archetype that's determining how to utilize the energies of beingness, doingness, stability, and change on behalf of mission, preferably in service to higher wisdom, higher
Right.
love and wisdom, however
Right.
you can conceive of that. And this is this five archetype structure really, I think, is the ideal executive team architecture for a transformation marketplace oriented business. And this was not needed in the product services economy. It wasn't needed, and it wasn't used. So pivoting into this new C-suite architecture, which, as I said earlier, businesses are trying to do with all of these novel names for different chief officers, like chief happiness officer. They're barking up the right tree, but they don't have the framework for making intelligent decisions about how to respond to what they're aware needs to change. And that's basically the archetypal structure in a nutshell.
Yeah, and that centerpiece is the CEO.
Of
The-
course, it is the
The
CEO.
architect, the orchestrator, the whatever, whose responsibility is how to best utilize these four energies to get the best outcome for the company.
Yes. Can I add? I kind of put a teaser in there a moment ago about HR. Can I add one thing
Yeah,
about
yeah,
HR?
yeah, by all means.
So, in the beginning, when HR was first conceived of, out of the early years in the human potential movement in the 50s and the 60s, it really was conceived of as a lover archetype role. HR was supposed to nurture and develop personnel. What HR got saddled with, however, was compliance. So HR became the compliance police, and compliance is a stewardship responsibility. It's a sustainability responsibility. It's not a personnel development responsibility. And because HR was suddenly saddled with wearing two incompatible hats at the same time, the nurturance hat and the compliance hat, HR got hijacked and HR got watered down, and guess what got sacrificed? It was the nurturance part that got sacrificed in favor of the compliance part, when in fact, again, polarization. Both are important, but they're not the same role, and they can't be done by the same people. They've got to be, both of those responsibilities have to be fulfilled by different people.
Would you also say that one is much more strategic in nature and the other is much more tactical in nature? Between those two?
I don't think I would,
Okay.
actually, because there's a lot of strategy involved in developing a personnel development approaches, and then there's tactical implementation of training in soft skills, and then embedding the utilization of those soft skills in day-to-day operations. That's really tactical stuff. At the compliance level, it's strategic in the sense of you're looking at the question of how do you ensure stability and standards without stifling the creativity and life force and passion out of people. And those are strategic questions that then lead to tactical decisions in terms of policy generation and implementation.
So, Dr. David, we talked about not compartmentalizing life earlier, life, business, how it translates. So, how do your thoughts on that structure translate or relate to a human being instead of a business and their life?
I love that you asked that question because these 5 core archetypes are our essential architecture as human beings. We we are that. A whole human being is someone who utilizes, who embodies the energies of beingness and doingness, stability and change on behalf of our own personal purpose in service to higher love and wisdom. So we are the CEO of our own lives.
Yes.
And if we don't stop and smell the roses, the lover archetype, we're going to run out of life energy. We got to keep our cup full.
Yep.
If we are over focused on getting stuff done, we become doingness addicts and steamrollers. If we're over focused on stability in our lives, then we sacrifice our passion and our aliveness. And if we're over focused on transformation, then we have chaos in our lives. We've got to be all and not one or the other. And our sense of self has to sit squarely at the intersection of beingness, doingness, stability, and change as the orchestrator of those energies on behalf of our personal purpose and service to higher love and wisdom, as I said before. Well, this is our human design as individuals. And if companies are out of alignment with that human design at a company structure level, there's going to be unnecessary tension and complications and conflict because of that misalignment.
And that's, in a nutshell, why I'm so passionate about what I do and try to bring this to the focus of people about the overlap between life and business, is that the foundational elements, the structure, and everything else is not 100%, but maybe 90% or 80% the same.
Yeah.
And if you can get one, if you can picture one and understand how that works, then it's easy to translate over to the other side. And if more people could get that early in their life, how much easier life would be, as they go down their life journey.
Yes, yes. One of my programs is called An Education in Being Human We Never Got But Always Needed. And it's really because of that. I mean, the what's really delicious is the intersection between human potential and business success. Right? And unfortunately, those two realms have been separated from each other too much, not only in the business world, but in the governance world. I've given training programs to leaders all the way up to ambassadors to the World Trade Organization, and some of them have actually, before I've gotten my hands on them, have actually held this belief that they can be effective world leaders without dealing with the human potential aspect of being human, thank you very much, because they think that the human potential movement, and they're not entirely wrong, at least in certain circles, is really narcissistic and self-absorbed. But the narcissistic and self-absorbed version of human potential is self-indulgence. It's not human potential.
Right. Yeah, human potential to look outside ourselves.
Yeah.
So, as listeners of this podcast will know, one of my favorite subjects is the dynamic between love and fear. So if we look at that archetype structure that you laid out, with which one of the energies is based in love. How does fear play into all of it? Does it play at all, or is there? How does the fear dynamic play into it? And is there a certain archetype that needs to be paying attention to fear in its role or dynamic within the company, uh, in an effort to get the most potential, if you will, or best outcome out of the company?
Hmm. I love your question. So, all of the archetypal roles are different versions of love. Love through preserving stability and standards, love through getting things done, love
Mm-hmm.
through transformation and innovation, love through nurturing human potential, love through being a great orchestrator. So, love has its own flavors in each of these five archetypal roles. Fear is basically in psychology what would be called shadow, the parts of
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, or in the case of a business, the parts of a business that it denies, represses, the don't talk rules, the stuff that we don't talk about because it seems too hot to handle, or because we degenerate into going to war with each other when we bring them up, or dysfunctional beliefs or procedures that we indulge in anyway, right? All of that's shadow, and all of that's based in fear. So fear is simply the absence of love, or it's simply a block. Fear is a block to the awareness of love's presence.
Mm-hmm.
And when a company doesn't understand shadow, doesn't understand the dynamics of repression and denial, and unjustifiably justifying dysfunctional policies and stuff like that, then it becomes a fear-based culture, because there's an old saying actually in 12-step traditions like Alcoholics Anonymous: we're only as sick as our secrets. And secrets only happen when fear is present. So, a business that is always shadow forward, is always looking at the question of what are we hoping we don't have to deal with, that we actually have to deal with, and how do we do that in good ways? How do we have difficult discussions about touchy topics in transformative ways? Well, guess what? Most people in society have never been trained in how to do that. And so what they do is they go to war against each other at the level of surface positions. My surface position, or my premature solution, is right, and anyone who doesn't agree with my position and my solution must be wrong. Well, that's grandiosity. That's narcissism. That's
Mm-hmm.
thinking that in a business, one person can see the whole picture of a business. And any business worth its salt is too big for one person to see the whole picture. We've got to synergize our puzzle pieces like putting together a jigsaw puzzle in order for us to succeed.
Well, unfortunately, I could go on
Yeah.
for hours with this conversation, but unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good spot. I can't uh, encourage people enough to go buy the book, read it. It's fascinating. I wholeheartedly agree. It provides a great framework for the future for business. The question is business ready for it? Right? We sort of laid
Consumer
it.
demand demands it, so
The consumer
businesses will
demand
get it.
demands it, but can business get out of its own way and be innovative and say, yeah, we need to change with the times, and here's a great way forward for us to do that. And maybe that requires that we in the C-suite change as individuals as well to actually level up and grow in some way to be able to make this happen. That's what the world's going to sort of stand by and watch and see if business has that capability. And if they do, they're going to keep marching forward in what Simon Sinek calls the infinite game, and those that can't will go the way of the Kodaks of the world,
Yep.
Yeah.
and so forth. So, if people wanted to, besides buying your and Mark's two books, what are other ways that people could engage with you in your efforts in
Hmm.
this area or avenue?
Sure. I wear multiple hats, and the best place to go is basically my hub site, which is drgruder.com. That's drgruder.com. And from there, you can click on whatever aspect of what I do is of interest to you. And you can also be in touch with me through that site as
Yeah.
well.
All right, Zach, over to you for our
Well,
last question.
one last question, Dr. David, that we always ask every guest, and prompted you a little bit ahead of time, but there's never any right or wrong answer, but what it is to you. And we typically go back through, pick out some nuggets at the end of each season, the ones that really stand out. But what do the words "generate your value" mean to you?
What generate your value means to me is having a clear picture of the future that I want to see humanity and myself live into, being clear about my own purpose, my own role, unique role in helping that future emerge for myself and for in the spheres of influence that I'm called to have influence in, and then embodying that purpose without sacrificing my cherished relationships or my personal well-being. That to me is the essence of that phrase that I love that you have as your podcast title.
Yeah, and I would even add to it, what internal work do I need to do that enables me to do everything that you just laid out in your statement, right?
You're right. That's
If,
implicit, and thank you for making it explicit.
Yeah.
from a
Yes.
self leadership perspective, if I'm going to level up my game and live out the the potential that I have, that the universe created me for, I need to do that work that then enables me to go do those things in terms of influence and so forth in the world. And that,
Absolutely.
you just encompassed everything that I had in my thought process when I picked that name for my business and
Beautiful.
this
Yeah, and
podcast.
you it's impossible to emphasize what you just said enough, because we leaders lead at the level of their self-development and limitations despite their highest
Yep.
intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Good intentions are a great start, but they are far from enough.
Yes.
Yes.
100%.
All right, for the listening audience, we can't thank you enough for using that finite but very valuable resource in your life called time. You had a choice, and we can't thank you enough for making the choice to come listen to our conversation today with Dr. Gruder. And hopefully, you got some what Zach and I like to call golden nuggets out of this conversation that you can use in integrating it into your life, into your leadership, into your business, that helps you to live up to the potential that you were created for by the universe. That's our intent, and why Zach and I do the hard work to be with you every single week and bring in great guests like David Gruder to the table to have these conversations. Because Zach and I are doing our best to try and live out our potential
Exactly.
in the world and generate value and bring influence into the world to help the world grow and humanity grow from that perspective. But as I did last season, I'll remind you again this season. We're creating the potential. We're creating the seed. But that seed doesn't plant and grow into that potential unless you see benefit in this episode and share it in your network to others, so that seed lands and people have an opportunity to put water on it to grow by listening to the episode, getting the value out of it that we created through the content and making it an impact or an influence in their own life. So we can't encourage you enough to share this episode or any episode that we put out to enable that to occur. So that being said, Zach and I are here every week with a new episode and another great guest like David Gruder. We can't encourage you enough to subscribe so you don't miss an episode and have an opportunity to share it with others and get some benefit out of it.
And turn those notifications on so you make sure you don't miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, with that being said, have a great rest of your day. Have a great week. We'll see you next week with another great episode right here on the Generate Your Value podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the Generate Your Value podcast. If you find our conversations to be useful in your life, I invite you to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss an episode.
You can find me online at Instagram at _Zach.Levy, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
For information on my coaching services, visit my website at www.generateyourvalue.com. You can also find me and my company on LinkedIn, Facebook, X, and Instagram. Simply search for Generate Your Value on those platforms.
Once again, thanks for joining us for today's podcast, and we invite you to generate your value in this world.